Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. In addition to the 5 Reasons Sports Network, you can find us every day, Monday through Friday, on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. Download Dash Radio, the app, for free, and then search for Nothing But Net, and you'll find us every day, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. Also, check out 5reasonsports.com. We are the no paywall website in South Florida. You get all the latest content, not just on the Heat, but also on the Dolphins, Marlins, Inter Miami, MMA, Panthers, and, of course, the Dolphins, who open up this Sunday. Also, check out our YouTube channel. We're up to 5,000 subscribers. We hit that number tonight. And as we speak, Alphonse Sidney is hosting over there. So in addition to checking us out, you can check out our stream there as well. Also, all the great sponsors in the 5 Reasons Sports Network. This episode is sponsored in part by Gonzalez and Tybor. That's a law firm that can be found at bankruptcyisgoodforyou.com. That's bankruptcyisgoodforyou.com. A recent report showed that over 45% of people use their stimulus checks, remember, we only got one, to repay debt. This is money that could have and should have gone to cover living expenses. Even before the pandemic, household debt in this country, especially credit card debt, was going up, and it was hurting families and small businesses. Nobody likes to consider bankruptcy as an option for dealing with your debt, but bankruptcy is one of the few laws that exists to actually help consumers. So before you make another debt payment that you can't afford, or you do something drastic like empty out your 401k or borrow money from friends and family, why don't you talk to a professional about your options? Contact Gonzalez and Tybor. That's bankruptcyisgoodforyou.com. The phone number, 954-378-8184. An attorney will answer your call. Again, it's 954-378-8184. Consultations always free and can be done by telephone or video conference. The website, bankruptcyisgoodforyou.com. And now, today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back. Here is today's floor plan. I've got Greg Sylvander. I've got Brady Hawk, who just posted the latest takeaways on the websites. I'm going to check those out as we're doing the episode. As I mentioned, Alphonse Sidney is over on the other side, on the YouTube side tonight. Alex Toledo is probably going to be bouncing back and forth. He's going to be on the Zoom calls. Here's the story. The Miami Heat, who were picked by most to finish somewhere between 6th and 8th in the Eastern Conference, finished with the 5th seed. Of course, the season has been going on now for more than 11 months. I remember training camp up in West Palm Beach when Alex Toledo and I were up there. This thing is still going. The Miami Heat are advancing to their first Eastern Conference final since 2014, when their starting lineup included Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh. And they're doing it, Greg, largely, at least after what happened tonight, because they might have won this series going forward. We don't know what would have happened with Giannis potentially coming back, because he wanted to try to play tonight initially. They're doing it mostly because a 20-year-old rookie took over the game, in my view, on both ends during stretches. And he, along with, I'm talking, of course, about Tyler Herro, he, along with Kelly Olynyk, Andre Iguodala, played huge roles tonight in a game where Jimmy Butler took a while to get on track at all, and Bam Adebayo never really did.
Wow. All I can say is, wow, Tyler Herro. I mean, to see this game after game, he's doing different things. The last game, even in a loss, he's hitting clutch three after clutch three. He has more clutch threes in the playoffs than any rookie since I think they've been tracking the damn stats. Now Tyler Herro has a game like this, and really one that Miami had to get. It just you could feel that this was a feisty Milwaukee bunch that really didn't want to go home, and a team that's as well prepared as them, that played as well as they did all year. They weren't going to go quietly, and Herro to step in and be so efficient, to be able to do things with the assists and just all-around play. I mean, I can't speak glowingly enough about Herro's play in this closeout game.
Brady,
Conference finals.
Conference finals, and we're going to get to the emotion of it, but I just want to touch real quick on what he did tonight, because I don't want to get lost. The kid was the best player on the floor. And, Brady, I think you actually kind of I don't forecast this a little bit. I feel like I forecast this a little bit. There was a Tyler Herro game that was coming, but it wasn't just the scoring. It was running the pick and roll, 3 straight possessions where he made the right play during a key sequence. And also defensively, the block, which ended up, a foul that was overturned, but also several times where he closed out at the right time or made plays around the rim. I mean, I've said repeatedly that this may end up being the best run that a Heat rookie has ever had. Dwayne Wade had a great run. It didn't make it to the conference finals.
Yeah, I think you hit on it right there. You're talking about his defense. You talk about that block that he had, but what stood out to me most with his defense is we've talked about his defensive instincts all season, but just how we've kind of doubted his on-ball defense. And today he was on absolutely everybody, making switches, doing everything possible on the defensive end. And then you talk about the playmaking side of things. He was started the season as a shooting guard, mostly looked as a catch and shoot guy, and you look at him now running the pick and roll, as you said. But the thing that stood out to me with his playmaking is running the fast breaks at such a methodical speed that he runs at his own speed and he doesn't force anything. He made that amazing pass, no-look pass to Andre Iguodala for an open dunk. He just makes all these plays that you talk about him being a scorer. And today, 2 other sides of his game showed up more than his scoring somehow, even though he had that amazing scoring game.
Well, that's the thing about it, Brady, is that the beginning of that game, I was just like, they need to slow down. They need to slow down. Jimmy was playing too fast, trying to do too much too soon. I was trying to find out if he heard before the game that he wasn't on the all-defensive second team, because I thought something got into him that, like, he had the 3 turnovers early. I mean, there was a point in the game where the Heat had 16 turnovers and Bam and Jimmy had 10 of them. And Bam, other than the willingness to take that jumper, did not want to attack Brook Lopez at all. And that's why I tweeted, I think it was late in the 3rd or early in the 4th, Tyler Herro is going to have to make shots and make plays because Bam and Jimmy won't look at the basket. And I just feel like if he's not the factor he is in this game, because there were times that Goran struggled, although he picked it up late, and he did make some key shots. Obviously, the end of the first quarter play I thought was critical. There were a couple of other times where it's like every time that Milwaukee looked like they were making a run, Goran would make a shot. But to me, it was Herro. And the other guy I want to talk about here a little bit, because we pushed him to the side a lot this season, and to an extent so did Erik Spoelstra, was Kelly Olynyk. And I'm looking at Kelly's numbers because without you take a look, Brady, at without Bam's big contribution tonight, Kelly was huge. And I'm looking at the plus-minus numbers for him tonight. He was a plus 22 in 17 minutes. Yeah. 12.6 rebounds and an assist. And they were running stuff through him, and he was also, I thought, very good defensively tonight.
Yeah, that was one of the main things that stood out to me. He's just everywhere on the court. He's just not only just a couple of blocks. I don't know how many blocks he had, but he was contesting some shots at the rim. He had some steals. He was just very scrappy all game. But I remember some pregame streams that we did when you had a text about somebody said that they're one shooter away from getting the sweep or something along those lines. And I said there was going to be a Kelly Olynyk game in there somewhere, and that this is finally the game. He's just a guy that can spark your team in so many different ways. Obviously, he can shoot the ball so well. Obviously, it's kind of streaky at times, but obviously tonight he had it going. But as we saw, he does so many small things. As we say, so many of these guys on this team do. He's just also one of those guys that just makes this critical plays during a game that you just don't see in a stat sheet as well.
And there were some Bam Olynyk minutes together. Not a lot. They played together a little bit. There were also, though, some Kendrick Nunn minutes, and I want to focus on him a little bit too, because Kendrick's had the roughest time of any Heat player in the bubble. I think the only guy that would even be close in the conversation would be Myers Leonard, because Myers went from a starter to a guy that wasn't playing at all. But Kendrick actually had more struggle moments. But tonight he did play 22 minutes, only had 6 points, was 3 of 7 from the floor, but was a plus 14. They were able to play those 3-guard lineups. Some they didn't play it a lot, actually, but they were able to play against the 3-guard lineups in a way that they wouldn't have been able to if Nunn was giving them nothing, right? Like he started to give them something tonight. He was more aggressive. I thought his on-ball defense also was much better than it's been, and that helped limit the Bucks guards, because we know that Eric Bledsoe is not a good shooter. I think the Bucks need to go find themselves another point guard if they want to go somewhere, because this is 2 straight postseasons where he's laid an egg. But Wes Matthews played a really, really good floor game today. But George Hill was 1 of 8. DiVincenzo did end up 5 of 9 and 3 of 6 from 3, but they cooled him off a little bit as the game went. But Bledsoe ended up 2 of 12, 1 of 4 from 3, 9 points. It was really not a big factor, and except for rebounding, and a lot of that had to do, I thought, with the fact that none in Herro gave them the minutes defensively that they needed.
It's kind of funny because it seems like it's like a common theme that all the guys that were kind of lower end defenders were the guys that stood out today on defense. Kelly Olynyk, Tyler Herro, Kendrick Nunn. But I think that's what you kind of needed in a playoff game. Last game for the bench unit scored 14 points, and today, I don't remember the exact number, but they obviously took over that game in the first half. Obviously, the starters weren't playing well. Then, obviously, in the second half, they took over again when the third quarter started, and they ended that third quarter strong. So you're going to need this bench unit to step up, because there's not many bench units doing what this team's doing now, especially on both sides of the floor, what they're doing on defense today. So it's going to be something to look at for this, looking at this next series. I don't want to go too ahead yet, but just looking at what they have compared to these other teams with this bench unit advantage is interesting.
And we're going to look ahead a little bit, but Greg, I want to get into Erik Spoelstra some, because we talked before the bubble started that this was not about prepping for one game or one team. There was a plan when they came into the bubble about how they wanted to do things, how they wanted to involve certain players based on how they came back to the bubble, how he was going to utilize these different combinations, and how he was going to develop different skill sets. So I'm looking tonight, and again, I know there was no Giannis, okay? I get it. But this was a proud team that was pretty damn good without Giannis this season, at least until they got into the bubble, when they weren't as good as they were previous. And you just saw some of the things that Erik laid out play out, okay? So I want to go through a few of them with you. One of them was, to me, the priority when they got into the bubble was Tyler Herro is going to run offense, and he's going to run pick and roll. And we're going to trust him late in games to do that so it doesn't all fall on Jimmy and Goran. And so what happens tonight? 37 minutes plus 23, stat line of 14, 8, and 6 with a steal and a block. And we talk about the spectacular assists. Then you talk about Goran Dragic. We're going to put him in position where he's going to do something he hasn't done the whole season, but we trust him to do, which is to be a starter and play heavy minutes. Tonight, 33 minutes, 17 points on 7 of 15, also had 4 rebounds and a couple assists, and it was a +8. Okay, something else that we're going to do, all right? Andre Iguodala is going to be a big, big factor for us, bigger factor than he was before the restart. Tonight, I thought his 18 minutes were critical. Ended up with 5 rebounds and a couple assists, but just calmed the game down when Jimmy couldn't early in the game. And then the other one, Kendrick Nunn, looked like his confidence was shot. He was totally lost, and he ends up giving them 22 competent minutes tonight. I still didn't totally understand the decision not to play Derrick Jones Jr., but again, they went to 3 guards on the other side, so you had to size down, and at the same time, you were playing Olynyk. So it does make some sense that way. But you look at those decisions, and this is why I think, Greg, people focus with Erik on – I didn't think he had a great game 4, and I said so with you on the pod. But I think people focus on what happens that moment, that substitution. The difference between him and so many other coaches, and the difference between him and Riley and this organization and so many other organizations, is there is a plan. And you may not see it right away, but it builds to it.
It's so true. I mean, it kind of transcends the X's and O's of did he challenge a play or not, or did he make a substitution for a free throw shooter or not. Ultimately, when you talk about trusting Tyler Herro, he was doing that from the moment they got back into the bubble. It was like you really saw Herro had an off season to – I mean, it was essentially like he was coming into his second year. They were trusting him more. They were just relying on him more to figure it out on the fly. And with Goran, it was a completely different circumstance. It wasn't much about that he had an off season as much as they knew that you could rely on him in a heavier way for a shorter stint, because although, yeah, the bubble is a taxing few months isolated, it isn't the grind of a travel season. So they really could kind of put him in a different position and he could flourish that way. Kendrick Nunn, this could be the type of springboard game where I'm not saying we're going to get the Kendrick Nunn that we saw all throughout the season, but just his ability to be a viable, competent option off the bench have the ability to score at least in some level of efficient ways, and then not turn the ball over. That's the recipe for Kendrick Nunn to be a player that they can go to. The three guards forced him to head in that direction. I would imagine Boston may force them to at least experiment with Kendrick Nunn out there as well. So, I mean, it really shows that Spoelstra came in with specific finite details he wanted to get to, and he stuck to them. Jay Crowder's another one. He's riding and dying with Jay, and it all kind of has been wrapped up and it's working.
Yeah, and you look at tonight, Jay actually from a plus-minus standpoint was, had to struggle the most of anybody on the floor, but you could still see the moments where he was so important to them. And I just think what they've been able to do and establish here through 2 rounds and through the bubble games, even though they went 3 and 5, is a trust level in so many different guys that it's going to make them a really tough out. Now, we're going to talk about Boston and Toronto going forward. We'll do a little bit of it later on the episode. But I think what you saw in this series was Milwaukee would have an answer for one thing, but not for everything. And I never really felt, guys, like that game was going to get out of control today because, again, there was another rush of Heat players that was coming in that could change the tide on it a little bit. I want to go back to Herro for a second because that's going to be, in my view, that really is the story tonight. And we talked about Dwayne having moments as a rookie, and he was a starter. So there was more responsibility on him at that time. But Dwayne also didn't close every game as a rookie. If you remember, one of the famous things, and we should have given Stan a harder time about this on the pod, was he wasn't in there at the end of Game 6 against Indiana in the second round. He was pulled for Rafer Alston because they needed a 3, right?
I remember. Yeah, very well.
And then now he was on the floor for other games, of course, and he made the big shot in Game 1. He made a big shot in Game 5. He was instrumental in Game 7 when they closed that thing out. So he did make a lot of those big shots. But you start to look at the numbers now through 2 rounds, and Tyler's are right there. And you start to look at the trust level, and it's right there. And then you look at the ages, and Dwayne was 2 years older.
And that's the kicker. That's the kicker.
That's
right
the
there.
kicker. Is he at this point? Untouchable? We keep asking that question, but the more of these he has, is Pat Riley going to part with a guy who does something like this?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I don't see him. Just seeing what he's doing, you kind of look at, like I said earlier, you kind of thought of him as a scorer, but looking him doing everything on the floor, he's a 20-year-old leader. He's an on-court leader at all times, no matter who's on the floor. It kind of stands out to me. And just obviously we've talked about his confidence all year, but one of the plays that stood out to me with Tyler all game was he airballed a 3. And the next possession down, he took baseline and did a behind the backboard floater. And that right there just defines Tyler Herro. Like, he just isn't fazed by anything. Game 5 of a playoff game to close it out and airballs a 3 and comes back and does that. That's just – it's amazing, really.
Yeah, I mean, Greg, where do they go with here from because his confidence is only going to grow after what they've done. And then you saw at various times in this game that Butler and Dragic took a step back to let Herro go. I know a lot of the minutes were not with Jimmy because he kind of came in with that second unit and Jimmy was rolled out and Iguodala was in for him. But but it's not going to go backwards from here.
No, the team was deferring to Tyler there late, and that's just it's mind-blowing to watch because if you also think about it in the bigger picture context, you now have Adebayo and Herro going into their first conference finals as 22 and 20-year-olds, and they're getting this kind of seasoning, which it's especially something that, the Miami Heat would harp on, playing winning basketball, getting in those high pressure situations. So you start to get into a situation where, because he's a cost controlled player who fits everything they want to do personally as well as on the court schematically, I just don't see a situation where it makes sense. I mean, are you going to pay Bradley Beal, who may be better today, but in 2 years, who knows? Are you going to pay him $35-36 million when Herro is where he is? So he is kind of, approaching that conversation. No one's untouchable, but he's approaching that conversation 100%.
Because the other guys we've talked about that, we always talk about the guy that Pat would flip, right? The really good player you flip to get the superstar. But Caron Butler never won anything here. Lamar Odom never won anything here. I mean, they had the one run to the second round. Glenn Rice never won anything here. Okay. Josh Richardson never won anything here. So all of the players we talk about, we're like, okay, this is Kurt Thomas, who was flipped for Jamal Mashburn, never won anything here. I mean, these were all good players.
They were some of the time players, not all of the time players, as Riley puts it.
Correct. All of them, right? I mean, pretty much. I mean, Karan's a little unfair because Karan was so banged up that second year. But yeah, I mean, Lamar had that reputation. It didn't play to it here. Josh was a little bit, right, where you couldn't really rely on Josh in the big moments, even though you liked what he brought. Everybody they've traded really good players. They traded Eddie Jones. He traded Mash. I mean, he didn't trade Eddie Jones. Well, no, he did trade Eddie Jones. I'm sorry. And he traded Mash to get Eddie Jones. I mean, Pat Riley's traded a lot of really good players. I don't know that he's traded one who I know he hasn't, who at 20 years old was being deferred to by two All-Stars and a 34-year-old who has made an All-Star team to take them home in certain situations.
Listen, in the Shaq trade, the one piece he ultimately was unwilling to part with is the guy who was doing what Herro's doing in this playoff run. So it's like if there was ever another parallel where you would say this is a guy he's holding on to, the Herro is kind of the Dwayne player of this team in terms of that kind of value at that age.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say when you were comparing the players kind of Tyler. Now we're at the point, not saying that Tyler is Dwayne at all, but you're getting to the point now that these numbers that he's putting up in a playoff series is pretty similar, that you have to kind of look at him the same way. Now, obviously, Dwayne's on another level with what he's done, but he's at both of them at this time, at their ages, it's pretty comparable.
And the fact, again, that Dwayne Wade, and not just because it was our tweet over at 5 Reasons Sports, but that Dwayne Wade would respond to a stat comparison between himself and Tyler as rookies, which I was a little afraid of making because I didn't know how Dwayne would take it. And his response to it was to quote tweet it with emojis of a baby and a goat. Tells you what he thinks of the kid. Like he already has the stamp of approval. He has the Jimmy stamp of approval. He has the Riley stamp of approval. He has the Calipari stamp of approval, which meant something to Riley. And he has the most important one, which is the Dwayne Wade one. And
yeah, Ethan, you said it from day one that the players knew that Herro was going to be great. It was a thing where they recognized that there was a short window of time where they were going to get to do the rookie hazing thing on him because eventually he's going to be great. And you hit the nail on the head because that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. I don't think there's any question that they've decided that he may end up being their leading scorer next season. I think there's a real possibility of that. Obviously, Jimmy gets a lot of those points late with the free throws, but I could see Jimmy continuing to take a step back, offensively and allowing him to grow. And I do think he's going to be a starting guard. The one guy we haven't talked about much, and it's going to be interesting as we go forward, is Duncan Robinson, because essentially they were, they took Duncan Robinson out of pretty much 4 out of the 5 games in this series, and it didn't end up mattering. Now, does it matter if Giannis plays? Maybe. But they were able to find other solutions, and, they were forcing the ball. The Heat were forcing the ball, and Duncan was forcing things to try to get shots off, and it wasn't working. And finally, when he got that 4th foul, it was like, okay, enough. And you could tell it was going to be none in Herro from there. But that's the thing. This Heat team is multiple. They don't just have one option, or 2 options. They've got a lot of different options. And tonight, it wasn't their 2 best players, supposedly, the 2 guys who you believe are their best players, Butler and Bam, the 2 all-stars, their best two best two-way players. It was other guys who had to make things happen. All right, I want to tell you about a great sponsor, the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Like I always tell you, all of our sponsors are local. Did you know that Florida is a no-fault state? That means if you're in an accident, no matter who's at fault, your insurance company is responsible for paying your medical care. In Florida, you only got 14 days after an accident to see a doctor to report an injury. After that time, you're responsible for your own medical bills. So make sure you get checked out by a licensed health professional. If you suspect you got hurt, even if you think your injuries are minor, get more health tips like this and more by following our friend Dr. Jonathan Chung on Twitter. You can also follow him at Keystone Neuro. That's KEYSTONENEURO on Twitter, or the website is chiropractickeystone.com. He'll do Zoom calls with you if you can't get up there to Wellington. 15-minute free consultation by Zoom if you mention 5 reasons. So make sure if you're having back trouble of any kind, particularly from an accident, make sure that you get checked out. Again, it's Dr. Jonathan Chung, Keystone Neuro on Twitter, or chiropractickeystone.com. All right, let's put this thing in perspective now a little bit, and then we'll look ahead. So 11 months ago, they had training camp in West Palm. It's almost 12 months. It was the first week of October that we were up there. And this thing is still going, and this team has evolved. But I remember going back to it in that training camp, kind of the confidence level that a lot of the players on the team had. I remember obviously the 3:30 workouts with Jimmy Butler. And I remember that really the only controversies there was James. This is how long this season has gone on for, guys. James Johnson coming to camp and not getting at the weight that Pat Riley wanted him to be at. I remember walking by Pat up there on the campus. I can't remember. Kaiser University. That's right. Kaiser University, walking by Pat, and he was clearly having a conversation with somebody about how James Johnson needed to get his weight down. I've always suspected that was probably his agent, Mark Bartelstein. Saw me walk by and stopped talking for a second. They kept talking. And then Dion Waiters, I remember this distinctly, was myself, Anthony Chang, and Alex Toledo, who was up there doing his first coverage for us, asking Erik Spoelstra about what Dion's role was going to be, and then us going to Dion, and Dion clearly not believing his role should be what Erik thought it should be. That's how damn long this season has been. It's like a year in 2 weeks. And
it feels like
in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's crazy.
Doesn't it feel like life has just absolutely been taking that long? Like it feels like this whole situation from 2019 to 2020 has taken forever, but it really is night and day. And just to put this in further perspective, just for fun, because I just can't help myself. The Heat now have made the conference finals 7 times in the last 15 years. The 76ers have made the conference finals 9 times since 1949. The Knicks twice since 1973. The 76ers 5 times since 1949. I gave you that one. And the Cavs 5 times since 1970. They're all the stats together. It's incredible to see. Of all the builds, the big 3 will always be the best haul that Riley has ever made. And there's been some absolute magnificent moves he's made throughout the years, and some cap gymnastics that Andy has done that have been just unbelievable to see transpire. But this particular build is gratifying in a way that I think is different, but also as much a credit to the organization as any build that they've ever done. And it's huge from a big picture perspective to have these guys in the conference finals a year ahead of schedule.
I think it's the best build they've ever done, honestly. Now where it ends up, I don't know. I mean, it has to end up in titles eventually for us to give it that characterization. But if you do the comparison, okay, Pat comes down here off the Knicks run, and, he comes down to an organization that needed direction, right, and had really no purpose and no relevance. But it had a core piece in Glenn Rice, and he was able to flip that piece and then, obviously makes the midseason trades, gets Tim Hardaway. That's the second piece. After Zoe, Mashburn's the third piece, and voila, you've got a contender. It was kind of a blank slate to a certain degree. Like he wasn't in cap hell when he got down here. It was, it was new, it was fresh in the sense of him being here. And so it was impressive. But then you look ahead at, the next one, right? So, and it's funny because a conversation I had with somebody in Vegas at Summer League was, talking about how we're always on the verge of a build. Sometimes you don't see it, but we're always on the verge of a build. Pieces have to move the right direction. But if you look close, you can see us building to something. So then, after that run, and obviously Zoe derails that run with his health. Okay, not his fault, of course, but it doesn't turn out the way that they expected. The drafting of Dwayne, and then that build, which basically came from the biggest part of that build, other than Dwayne, was kind of the rope-a-dope that he pulled on Donald Sterling by making the offer sheet to Elton Brand, right? Which Sterling matched, which then, wasn't going to match Odom also, gets Odom, And then that team outperforms and puts him in position to get Shaq. So gratifying build for sure. Then kind of the, sort of stuck in a little bit of no man's land because you didn't want to press too much, and you end up with the LeBron Bosh thing. But again, a lot of the LeBron Bosh thing was because of Dwayne. It wasn't because of organizational genius. Yes, you had to have a vision, and you had to make some moves at the last minute and dump Beasley, and Andy did obviously some great work there. But to me, this build it's more organic, right? It's two things. It's more organic because of the way they did it developmentally and the way that they basically beat everybody up in the draft, okay, by getting Herro and Bam. But it's also more difficult because they literally tied a hand behind their back like, with what they did for two off seasons. And somehow in the season after the greatest, most important player in franchise history retires, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned it right there, Tyler Herro getting drafted, obviously drafting Bam Adebayo, acquiring Jimmy Butler. You look at now, I'm sure we'll go further into this, but just the trade with Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala just further shows the geniusness of this organization that just basically put the icing on the cake of this season. Because if they didn't have these two guys, who knows where they would be right now. And you just look at everything as a whole, obviously getting two undrafted guys, Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn. It's just an amazing story as a whole for this whole entire team. When you just go through this roster, it truly stands out.
It's almost like some of the builds were for Pat, and then they were building for Dwayne. This feels like the build for Spoelstra, and it just embodies everything that I think he ultimately wanted to get to, and had some years where there were just some roster construction issues and other things that didn't allow him to get there. And I think it's just really, this team embodies everything Spoelstra wanted to get to. So it really is his build.
And the other thing about it is his build, no question. But it is a lot about Pat's legacy because Spoelstra is part of Pat's legacy. And so when you look now on a day that Adam Simon is being courted, out of the Heat front office by Sacramento, I think this is the fourth team that's made a run at Adam. When you look at Dan Craig being courted by, interviewed by Indiana and Chicago, okay? These are people, these are to a certain degree lifers, right? In addition. So a lot of this is Pat. To me, in some ways, I wish we could get him on Five on the Floor. If you're listening, because I do know others in the front office listen, we'd love to have you and have a conversation about this. Because to me, this has to be as gratifying to him as any of the others, because it's doing it not only with players that the organization has developed, but with coaches that he has played a role in developing, with front office people who have been given bigger roles over the past few years that he played a role in developing and then empowering, which, as we know, for an executive of that status with that kind of legacy is difficult to do sometimes, to empower others under you. And he's also doing it after a lot of people, and I'm not saying I wrote him off. I didn't write him off, but I was critical, okay? And as you know, Greg, for 2 years, a lot of people said Riley's washed, Riley's lost it. Riley, Wade gave him LeBron. They screwed up the Wade situation. They didn't cater to LeBron when they should have. I don't think many blamed him for Bosh, but a lot of the other situations, okay? Danny Granger, Josh McRoberts, okay? I mean, let's go through it a little bit, or let's not, okay? All of those situations, and to come out of it on the other side with a young team, okay, or young core players, cost control players. When one of the knocks against Riley was doesn't like young players, they always fought this perception, but doesn't like young players, doesn't want to develop those players, doesn't want to wait on those players. To do it with those guys in combination, okay, with a guy that they traded 2 first-round picks for that was looked at as an trade in Goran Dragic, okay, because it didn't lead to anything, partly because of what happened with Bosh, to get a guy in Jimmy Butler who wanted to play for the Heat after it was like, well, the Heat's not attractive anymore, after what happened with Dwayne, after what happened with the Big Three. It has to be his most gratifying build. It has to be.
Make no mistake, when I say this is a Spo build, I'm saying it was built for Spo, not by Spo. This is absolutely a Pat Riley. His imprint is on all of this. When you listen to Jimmy talk, that was the driving factor. And you know what? This is the ironic part of it all. I think Dwayne had as much to do with that influence, that positive influence, where Jimmy saw Pat in that light, and they just connected. And it really is. I know you hate it specifically, don't hate it, but you cringe when I go culture on this podcast. This roster and this build is Heat culture.
And Ethan, when you talk about Riley kind of getting criticism as just through the path of building his team and everything, one thing that stands out to me is I remember draft night, American Airlines Arena, when the Heat drafted Tyler Herro and people went through there basically chanting "Fire Riley," to go from that about a year and 3 months ago to now. It's to be in the Eastern Conference Finals from after saying that, and the guy in Game 5 of the semis of the playoffs taking over a game. It just, that right there just kind of sums it all up.
And in a year too, like you mentioned, that they made a trade that was somewhat controversial at the time, and they gave up on a number 10 overall pick, who they just felt didn't want to be here anymore. And there were other issues that went into it, which we've talked about on 5 on the Floor. But that it's difficult to cut bait, man. Like, organizations stay with players, especially a player who has shown something. A guy who you liked his character, like Justice Winslow, like, to cut bait on a player like that, a lot of organizations won't do it. They'll sit there for years and years and years trying to convince you that he's the guy. And they made it what was a difficult, in my view, difficult decision. We liked it. I think most of us approved of it, but it wasn't easy, okay, to say, here, number 10 overall pick, guy that you basically decided was going to be your point guard, to the point that you're going to put Goran Dragic on your bench, right? Guy that you traded 2 first-round picks for in Goran Dragic, and we're going to trade that guy in midseason, and we're going to get, what are we getting for him? A role guy in Jay Crowder, and, Andre Iguodala at age 36, who basically decided he didn't want to play for 7 months because he didn't want to play with his young Memphis teammates. It looks easy now, but if you've put it in that context, it wasn't. And this is the core difference. And this is why this organization wins out in this town. For all the kind of criticism, disagreements that you may have had with Pat Riley and things he's done over the years, and certainly I've had some, okay? But the word you use all the time, Greg, it's guts. Like, they will make decisions of conviction, right? And like, they will take the shot, okay? They will take Tyler Herro 10 picks before anybody else would because they identified something. They will take Bam Adebayo earlier than maybe he was projected because they identified something. A lot of organizations will not do that. They'll do the conventional thing, and that backfires. And I think and the other thing you do is you pluck a coach out of the damn video room. Okay. And you say, you're going to run this organization for the next 15 to 20 to 30 years. Like, that just doesn't happen. It's why they're the class organization in this town, because they believe in, I'm going to say it, they believe in their own culture. And, sometimes it's been to a fault, but most of the time it ends up working out. And I think this has worked out better than anybody. I don't put an asterisk on this, because Giannis was out. They were beating this team whether Giannis was in or out. I don't put an asterisk on it because of the bubble. We said before the bubble, this was going to be the biggest test of organizations you could have, being in the bubble. And they even went 3-5 in those seeding games, but they knew what they were doing. And now they're 8-1 going into the next round. All right, we're going to talk about that next round here in a second. Before we do, a word from another of our sponsors, SafeCubbies.com.
I want to introduce you to another of the great new sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and it is a sponsor that would be important in any time if you want to have a beautiful workspace, but it's especially important now when you need a safe one as well, and that's SafeCubbies.com, which offers modular office solutions designed to elevate your open office into a modern and safe environment at any budget. You can personalize your workspace with options like whiteboards, magnetic panels, acrylic sheets, and graphic branding. Most Most of the surfaces are non-porous for easy cleaning and can be removed or replaced within minutes. Now, this is for workplaces. They've got a bunch of different options on their professional series, but also they've got private room solutions, dividers and sneeze guards, and they have a classroom series as well. So if you're involved with a school, this is definitely something your school should check out, of course, if we have school in the fall. And that's the point here. We are entering a new normal period with COVID-19. SafeCubbies.com, which is locally owned, is the place that you want to go. The phone number is 754-216-1071. Again, that's 754-216-1071 or SafeCubbies.com.
All right, back on 5 on the Floor, nothing but net on Dash Radio. Again, find us every day, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Pacific. And, of course, check out Brady's work on 5reasonsports.com. We broadcast on the weekends. If you've been following Twitter the past couple of days, you'll know what that reference is. All right, let's get to it real quick. Toronto-Boston, 3-2 Boston. We talked about this a little on the pregame stream. Greg, do you give Toronto any chance to win that series?
I don't. I think that now that Ibaka has a bum ankle as well, Siakam has just not looked right. He's been inefficient in every game, even the one that they not the buzzer beater, but even the game after that where he looked better, he still took as many field goal attempts as he had points. So there's something just not right there. Nurse has even called him out on it. I just feel like Toronto has had a great run. And there's this moment where teams kind of realize that they've reached a max ceiling and they just get a look in their eyes. And I know they're resilient, so they'll probably make me look dumb and win a couple in a row now. But I think it's Boston that's going to advance now. The challenges that presents Miami, and I know we'll get into that into a second, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I think that there's some really, really interesting cross matches that'll take place. But ultimately, this is the Celtics are moving on.
I totally agree. I think that Boston's just clearly the better team. You look at the game yesterday, it just shows their ability. That was their absolute just strength. If they just get hot from deep, if they get their shooting going, it's going to be a lot of trouble for Miami in a matchup. I think it's kind of similar to the matchup that we saw today, just obviously at a much higher extent. You know, there's a team that's going to spread the floor a lot, and you're going to have to – it's another reason why I'm kind of surprised that we didn't see Derrick Jones Jr. today, not only to close out this series, but heading into that series, I think he could be very useful looking at the amount of just wings and different guys that they have able to score the ball, that you could use a Derrick Jones Jr. to kind of try and stop one of those players in those situations. So it's going to be interesting kind of to see how Miami in game one or whatever, when we get to there, how the matchups kind of line up and everything. But that's going to be one kind of interesting thing to see how he kind of rolls with his rotation.
Greg, let's look at that real quick here. So let's assume Boston. And I'm sure that the Heat would love for Toronto to win Game 6 and extend that thing. But let's assume Boston. And let's assume no Hayward at the start. I know there was a report that he's doing some running, but he's not really cutting yet. It seems to me like it's at least another week away, which means Marcus Smart's probably going to continue to start. First, do you make any changes to the starting lineup against them?
No, short answer is Spo is, and you harped on it back at the beginning about him sticking to the plan. This is the plan. They're not changing the starting lineup, by my view.
All right, so then if you look at it that way, let's look at the matchups real quick here. Goran's going to have to guard Kemba. He knows it well from 2016, right? We saw that in the playoff series. And one of the things about that series was, as much as Kemba scored, and he didn't have much around him, that was not a great team he was playing with in Charlotte, but he was inefficient in that series. I think he shot 35%. So they held him down enough.
And Goran was productive against him.
He was, right. They made him work. Okay, now Goran's 4 years older. Kemba's knee seems to be okay now. So it's going to be, and Kemba has looked great the past couple games in this series, so it's going to be a challenge. But that's your matchup. All right, your next matchup, if they're starting Smart, Brown, and Tatum, I guess you bury Duncan on Smart, right?
Right. I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at, does Jimmy guard Tatum or does Jimmy guard Jalen? I mean, it's between him and Jay, right? So
Yeah, I think Jimmy will go Tatum, and then Jay Crowder, just because of his strength and his little bit more of his build, can maybe offset some of the length and size of Jaylen Brown. That would be kind of my initial thought.
See, I
think they'll switch. Yeah, I think I'd switch. I think the physicality of Crowder might be a little bit better for Jason Tatum, and more the quickness and length of Jimmy Butler might be better for Jaylen Brown. Because we've seen in this matchup, I think Jay Crowder's obviously he benefits much more when he's just physical with guys that he could kind of bang around a little bit. And Tatum's one of those guys that's going to put his back to the basket that he could kind of benefit off of that, I think.
And then obviously Bam with Daniel Tice. And you look at the benches, Boston's bench kind of unheralded. It's not real deep. I mean, Wanamaker's played okay at times. Is there anybody who worries you over there on their bench? I mean, they got some young players who aren't ready yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be somebody who annoys us at some point, probably some Grant Williams type or Wanamaker. I can already see Daniel Tice is going to probably evoke Heat Twitter emotions, but you're right. They do have kind of a quietly good mix of guys off the bench, but Miami has the advantage there. And I think that's something Spoelstra is going to lean on heavy in the series as well, is really looking to the bench to create some separation.
All right. And one guy that's played really well for them, I just want to mention, is Robert Williams, that he could be a kind of a factor in that series. Obviously, Kelly Olynyk's played pretty good again today against some guys, but Robert Williams has been a force for Boston off the bench this series.
Yeah, he gives them activity, and they're going to have to counter that a little bit. And I also think that's where we could see Derrick Jones Jr. All right, we've got Alex Toledo. He's been on the Zoom calls. So this is a perfect way to close this episode. I just saw you tweeting some of Giannis's stuff, and also Jimmy and Spoelstra. Give us kind of the synopsis of what they all said.
I mean, Giannis is really sad. I don't want to speculate too much, but his eyes were pretty red. I don't know. He was doing a little bit of crying before he got on there. I just tried to hop on at the end there because, might as well. He was definitely – I felt bad for him. I like him as a player. I like the way that he just kind of, he has the motor of somebody who never stops trying to win all the time. I know – and, he was backing up the organization for prioritizing his health. But he kept saying, I want to play. I know I want to play. There's nothing I could have done about it. And I kind of felt bad for him there. But like Leif has said so many other times in the past, there's no better way to pitch Giannis than by doing what they did now. And this should not be lost on anybody, by the way, what they're doing, what they did. Beating a team that was supposed to win 70 in 5 games in the second round is just monumental. And I think that's what made Giannis cry. Jimmy is just so poised and confident and didn't even – I think this is Jimmy's first time in the conference finals, right?
I was trying to figure that out. Is it? I thought didn't they make the conference finals against Cleveland the year that David Blatt didn't.
That was the second round.
Yes, that
was second round. Okay. So he hasn't made the conference finals because the 4-1 series against Miami was the year before he was drafted, right? Because he was drafted the Norris Cole year.
Yep. Okay. So this is the first time in the conference finals, and he wasn't even like – I mean, he was so like, let's go. We still got more work to do. It's straight business for Jimmy. That's what it is. It's what it always is. But my God, it's like this is a serious accolade for him, and he's acting like he's been there before.
And then I saw you tweet something out from Spoelstra, who tried to put this in some perspective. I think Erik will move on from it pretty quickly, but it seemed like he acknowledged the moment also.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Spo, I think I think they're all kind of on the same page when it comes to that attitude where they're kind of – I think Spo kind of shows his emotion more when he's talking to the media, even if he tries to hide it more than Jimmy. I think Jimmy is just excellent at always hiding it. But Spo, he was giddy, man. Like he was talking highly on everybody on the team. He was saying, respect to the Bucks and that team and all of that, doing all of the coach talk. But there was no hiding the giddiness. He even got like into a tangent talking about the 2016 Heat and how he gets sad thinking about that team and how because they had a real shot to contend for a title before they Bosh went down, and then again when they lost the Raptors in 7. And when he starts going on little tangents like that, you can kind of just tell that he's good to talk. He feels good. He's in a good mood. Yeah, man, I think they're all on the same page right now. It's straight business though. He didn't even want to say you know, who they think they're going to play. He's kind of just letting everything play out, and they're all just being real mature about it. You know, I don't want to give on too much emotion.
All right, so let's let you close it with this because we've kind of talked this thing out, but we also got into a little bit of Boston, Toronto before you got in here. First thing, do you give because none of the three of us seem to give Toronto much of a chance to win that series. You giving them any chance?
Yeah, I'll give them some chance, right? Like maybe like a 30% chance, 20% chance. It's going to be tough to come back from down 3-2 versus a team that's kind of consistently stopped their offense in every game. But in every game, they've used more and more zone, and I think that's something we're going to be talking about a lot over the next couple of weeks versus the Celtics. But the zone has really helped them get some offense going and really get some stops in order to get those offense going and get some fast break attempts. But I just don't see the Raptors winning 2 in a row. They really got destroyed by the Celtics in the last game, and I just think the Celtics have so many defensive guys to just make it tough on Toronto, possession after possession. So I do think it's going to be Heat Celtics Conference Finals, and my God, I'm so hyped for that.
I was talking at the beginning of this pod about how you and I were up in West Palm Beach. It's a year in 2 weeks.
Really?
That we were up there.
A year?
At Kaiser University, trying to get Dion to create some controversy.
Well, he does that on his own, though. He did that on his own. We didn't do anything.
That wasn't really us. That was more him. We were just standing there. But I mean, if you think about that, it's been a year.
If I would have told you then that they would be in the conference finals beating the Bucks, what would you have said?
I mean, I liked their chances this year, but not for that. Not.
This is unreal. No, I don't know how much perspective, guys. I mean, talk you guys have done. I'm sure you have because Greg and Leif are here. But I'm just processing this right now, and it's crazy. They actually pulled it off, man. They really beat this team in 5 in the second round. It's still like hitting me. It's unbelievable. The Celtics are going to be really tough, though. Even if it's they didn't win as many games, they don't have anybody as good as Giannis. It's going to be a really tough matchup.
I mean, to me, the question is, does Tatum, and I want to save this because we're going to have a week of this, but, Tatum's been a little up and down in the bubble. If you get the really, I kind of know what you're going to get from Jaylen Brown, but if you get the really good Tatum, that's going to be a challenge. But I do think that the Heat, again, have enough bodies to throw at him that they can make it a little bit of a challenge for him. But, the other thing about that series that's going to be fascinating is seeing, Brad Stevens and Erik Spoelstra go at it. You go back to those Boston series, that was Doc and Erik, but Brad's of a different generation, and they've been compared to each other in a lot of different ways. I think Eric's going to I know he likes Brad Stevens. There's respect there, but that's a challenge I think he wants. I think it's a challenge. We're going to be curious to see how it plays out.
And Stevens is out coaching Nick Nurse right now, and which is pretty damn impressive. I know Nurse is only a second-year coach, but he's already getting regarded as like a top 3 coach around the league. We love to talk crap about Brad Stevens, we will, but got to give him credit there. I do feel better about the Celtics series than I would have a few months ago. Now that we saw that one game without Jimmy in this, in the bubble, where they just defended them better. I think now that they're a switch-heavy team and they've had so many reps playing this style of defense and a lot of success compared to how they did before the season, I think it's going to be a better matchup than I would have thought before. I feel really good about Crowder and Iguodala going in, really, really good, a lot better than I did about them, even when the season shut down. Mm-hmm. And I feel better knowing that Hayward won't be there. It gives them one less shooter, one less two-way guy, one less weapon who can kind of beat you. Because honestly, the problem in this series is going to be how they kind of figure out the matchups. And I think it would have been really hard if Hayward was in there as well, because it's one more guy who you can't really hide somebody on. But now that there's so many non-shooters playing over the Celtics, I think it's going to be a really good matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised if the series goes 7. And I think either one of these teams could win in 7.
Well, we talked about it. You'd have Duncan Robinson on Marcus Smart instead of Gordon Hayward. I mean, there's
going to be a lot of matchup hunting is the thing. Like, ideally, you want Duncan guarding Marcus Smart, but like we saw, there's going to be so much of Kemba Walker and Tatum kind of calling for screens, trying to get whatever matchup they prefer, whether it's Herro or Duncan or Goran. I imagine it's going to be more Herro and Goran than anybody. And we're going to see the same from the Heat with Kemba, and they should. They absolutely need to be attacking Kemba as much as they can, especially in the fourth quarter, and just make him unplayable. I think that's honestly one of the best ways that they can create offense in the fourth quarter when it gets tough with all those good defenders they have is by getting to the free throw line and by just attacking Kemba on the screens, because that's their one obvious weakness. Because, my God, the dude is 5'9". I stood in front of him. We were both coming out of Chicago, the All-Star weekend, and he was standing right in front of me, and I swear Kemba Walker might be shorter than me, and I'm like 5'10" at best, you know.
All right, I'm not letting you do any more analysis. We got a week of this, so you and Brady stop.
I'm excited, man. I don't know if you can tell.
Stop. No more analysis. We got a week. We got to get people through all this stuff. So let's see how things play out tomorrow. I'm thinking we may do a stream for Toronto Boston. I don't know. If Alf gets drunk.
Oh, I like that idea. I like that.
On that Biscayne Bay Brew, we might. Thanks to all our sponsors. Today, as usual, Gonzalez and Tybor, that's bankruptcyisgoodforyou.com. Our friend Dr. Jonathan Chung, that's KeystoneChiropractic.com. And, of course, SafeCubbies.com. We had the U-Brake Wheel Fix pregame show. We've got the Biscayne Bay Brewing postgame show. Thanks to all of our other sponsors. Thanks to everybody who follows us, 5reasonsports.com. And thanks to Dash Radio and Nothing But Net. Miami Heat are going to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2014. A little over a year ago, they had Dion Waiters, James Johnson, and Hassan Whiteside on long-term deals. Now they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, being led tonight by a 20-year-old rookie. Have a good night.
Culture.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.